All right, who actually authorized those thousands of Biden Autopen pardons? What's going on with the fixer-upper couple's gay new show? The new Superman movie, good or bad? All that and more on the Kylee Cast. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kylee Cast. I'm Kylee Griswold, managing editor at the Federalist. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're just listening, be sure to check out the full video version of the show on my personal YouTube channel or the Federalist channel on Rumble. I'd also love to hear from you, so you can email the show at radio@thefederalist.com. It has been a busy week of Biden cover-up news, starting with last Wednesday when Biden's White House doctor, Kevin O'Connor, finally appeared to testify before a House Oversight Committee in response to a subpoena. Except he didn't testify. As Biden's doctor, O'Connor would know more than anyone else about the ins and outs of Biden's cognitive decline. He probably tested him after he fell down the stairs or after that infamous debate performance, and he might have known about Biden's cancer way earlier than we did and way earlier than Biden pretended he knew. But one thing he definitely knows is who else knows and who else was part of the cover-up. But rather than cooperating, he pled the fifth and kept his mouth shut. Ashley Williams, a Biden aide who still works for him, was even worse. But when she showed up to testify, instead of pleading the fifth, she pled amnesia. In the 5-hour interview, Williams reportedly couldn't recall so many things, including if Biden used a teleprompter in cabinet meetings, if there were talks of giving Biden a cognitive test or a wheelchair, if she ever had to wake up the sitting president, or even easy personal questions like why did she get involved with his campaign in the first place, or had she talked to him within the past week? Pretty unbelievable. But these somehow aren't even the worst scandals. That distinct honor goes to, no surprise, the New York Times, which ran a piece on Sunday about Biden's Autopen. And that refers to the machine that replicates his signature on pardons and other documents rather than Biden actually signing his own name himself. Now, the Autopen issue is important because Biden signed thousands of acts of clemency on his way out the door, including for drug offenders and for almost everyone on federal death row. And all but one of these pardons, the one for his own crackhead son Hunter, was done by Autopen, not by Biden's own hand. So considering it was obvious to everyone with eyeballs that Biden was severely cognitively and physically impaired by the time he left office, and frankly, well before he left office, inquiring minds want to know whether Biden is the one who made the clemency decisions, or if it was actually the syndicate of nameless, faceless staffers who were running the country. This is especially important when it comes to Biden's sweeping preemptive pardons for people who caused irreparable damage to this country but were never actually charged with crimes. These people would include Anthony Fauci, Adam Schiff, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Mark Milley, but we'll get back to them. For now, let's take a look at this New York Times article, which is, of course, co-authored by Charlie Savage, a notorious Russia hoaxer, and thus the perfect person to run to with this Democrat CYA operation. The piece is clearly supposed to be a defense of Biden and his use of the Autopen. And the headline announces that. It says, Biden says he made the clemency decisions that were recorded with Autopen. But if you actually read the piece, that is not the takeaway at all. The piece itself provides zero proof that Biden made the decisions. None. In fact, every sentence of the story seems to indicate that Democrats just know they're in serious trouble. What the article actually claims is this, quote, Biden did not individually approve each name for the categorical pardons. Rather than ask Biden to keep signing revised versions, his staff waited and then ran the final version through the Autopen, which they saw as routine. In other words, Biden's staff are admitting, one, that the president did not actually authorize clemency grants and pardons for most of the people who received them, and two, that they changed documents that Biden allegedly authorized and then signed them with the Autopen without getting their changes approved. This probably explains why some big law firms, which were nowhere to be found, of course, when Democrats were waging lawfare against peaceful 2020 election protesters, mind you, are now rushing to give free legal services to a bunch of Biden staffers. But of course, there's more. Here's what we learned about the last-minute preemptive pardons for Fauci and his ilk. Quote, at the January 19th meeting, which took place in the Yellow Oval Room of the White House residence, Mr. Biden kept his aides until nearly 10 p.m. to talk through such decisions, according to people familiar with the matter, note the anonymous source. The emails show that an aide to Mr. Siskel, who was counsel for the White House, sent a draft summary of Mr. Biden's decisions at that meeting to an assistant to Mr. Zients, the chief of staff, copying Mr. Siskel at 10:03 p.m. The assistant forwarded it to Mr. Reed and Mr. Zients, asking for their approval, and then sent a final version to Ms. Feldman, copying many meeting participants and aides at 10:28 p.m. 3 minutes later, Mr. Zients hit reply all and wrote, quote, I approve the use of the Autopen for the execution of all of the following pardons, end quote. Now, this is a really confusing part of the story, so let's break it down. First of all, we're supposed to believe that the night before Trump's inauguration, Biden, the guy who could barely keep his eyes open for a simple interview and regularly called a lid by lunchtime, kept his staffers until 10 p.m. to talk through serious decisions. I doubt it. But even if we suspend disbelief, let's say the meeting did happen. The New York Times says that after the meeting, a staffer for one of the White House lawyers, who likely wasn't even present for the meeting, according to other parts of the article, emailed a summary of the meeting to an assistant for Biden's chief of staff, who then passed it along to the chief of staff and another aide, and then sent a final version to the White House staff secretary, who managed the Autopen. And in response, the chief of staff, Jeff Zients, replies, I approve the Autopen use. Notice, there is no point in there where Biden is directly consulted for any of this. It's all a big hug box of staffers giving each other permission to use executive power. There is no direct contemporaneous evidence that Biden gave the specific okay on anything. It is all third-hand claims that Biden said it was okay. And it turns out it was Zients, not Biden, who okayed the Fauci pardon. As my colleague Beth Brelhe wrote at the Federalist, the pardon directions had a broken chain of custody, leaving ample opportunity for the advisors or the aides to change or add to what Biden said, if they met with Biden at all. There's one other major thing that this New York Times article tries to hide, and that is the specifics of the 10-minute interview with Biden. Now, if you read the article, you'll notice that it includes tiny Biden quotes throughout, usually just short, punchy little phrases that give the impression that Biden's really with it, and definitely sharp enough to have made all of these clemency decisions. But the second paragraph of the piece links to Biden's interview with the New York Times, and what you find at that link is absolutely wild. Typically, if a news outlet publishes an interview with the subject, it's pretty close to a transcript. It's typically formatted as question, answer in chronological order, and maybe it's trimmed down or lightly edited for clarity, but that's pretty much it. Not this interview. The Times formats the article as excerpts from the interview, so there's no indication at all of how much they omitted. And instead of a Q&A format, the Times tried to edit the excerpts into nice little organized, coherent, and frankly, softball categories, such as on who made the clemency decisions. Really easy stuff. And still, Biden's complete inability to string together a full thought is bad, even with the Times doing everything in its power to help Biden along. Here's one excerpt regarding Biden's decision to commute the sentences of 37 of the 40 federal death row inmates. Here it is. And that's the reason, because it's sort of like, the guy who, I'm making this up, assassinates Abraham Lincoln. You can't pardon him because there's such a gigantic implication for things that go well beyond that individual murder. How the New York Times managed to get such nice quotes from this word salad is really impressive. But this is what the corporate media exist to do. Help Democrats accrue power at all costs, and then help them cover it up when they abuse that power. My colleague John Daniel Davidson wrote a really great piece about this scandal at the Federalist, and his conclusion is spot on. Quote, the New York Times can cite anonymous sources all at once to try to contextualize the use of the Autopen at the 11th hour of Biden's term. But like Biden's obvious unfitness for office throughout his presidency, the truth is right in front of us. Plain for all to see. His presidency stands as one of the greatest political scandals, perpetrated against the American people in a generation. And eventually, someone needs to answer for that. I could not agree more. They do need to answer for that. And if Republicans in Washington had any spine whatsoever, they would be employing Democrats' January 6th standard to get to the bottom of this. Rachel Bovard made an excellent point about this in the Federalist this week, and that's that the Times piece and the stonewalling from Kevin O'Connor and Ashley Williams, they aren't about covering up Biden's mental decline. They're about covering up the unelected and unaccountable coup allegedly taking executive action in Biden's stead. Because if those allegations are true, then their actions are not only void, they are criminal. Bovard is right. Republicans in Congress should give O'Connor immunity to make him testify and then build a case against the Biden syndicate. And if Democrats try to get in the way, Republicans should make them do it during televised primetime hearings. That's the J6 standard. Congressional Republicans have the power, if not the balls, to do this. And if they don't, they will be part of one of the biggest political cover-ups in American history. All right, if you've paid any attention to the news this week or logged onto Facebook, Instagram at all, there is no way you've been able to avoid the news about Chip and Joanna Gaines. They are all anyone is talking about online. And here to discuss the scandal, the latest scandal with Chip and Joanna Gaines, is my colleague at the Federalist and friend, Jordan Boyd. So, Jordan, can you tell us exactly what happened with this scandal?
Sure. Well, Chip and Joanna Gaines first got their fame on HGTV, a home and renovation show, but they've really expanded their empire. And part of that has been they started to produce a new show for HBO called Back to the Frontier. And it's supposed to be this homesteading challenge show where the cast gets dressed up in 1800s attire and really, works the land and tries to figure out what it would be like. And featured on this cast is a gay couple who had two sons via surrogacy. So they bought the eggs from a woman and then rented the womb of another woman to have their children. So this obviously raised a few red flags with a lot of Chip and Joanna's base because they are self-professing evangelical Christians and have a long time identity in that. It helps their rise to fame quite a bit. They built their brand on that, and then all of a sudden now have this endorsement in their new show just by wayward of casting someone in that lifestyle. So obviously there was an uproar on social media and otherwise, and they didn't take to it so well. In the Christian faith, you're called to accountability for your brothers and sisters in Christ, but Chip Gaines specifically was not a fan of people questioning why they had this couple on their show or why they hadn't made a statement or anything. And he sort of lashed out. It was really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in fact, lashed out pretty strongly against his fellow Christians by smearing them, basically accusing them of judging, of drawing conclusions without asking questions. It's like, I'm not really sure what questions you need to ask when you are putting this front and center on the advertisement for your new show. That doesn't really seem like the time when Christians should be asking questions so much as asking them what is going on. Like, there's no other question to ask the Gaineses at this point.
Absolutely. It came off really manipulative and in a way that was, I think, alarming for a lot of the people who had seen the Gaines's history with marriage. In 2016, there was kind of a controversy manufactured by BuzzFeed, which published an article, complaining that the Gaineses went to a church that believed in traditional marriage, which that's laughable. If you're a Christian, you should believe in the biblical definition of marriage between a man and a woman.
Right.
And the Gaineses, it was such a non-issue at the time that they really brushed it off, didn't make a statement or anything, but they also didn't let it deter them from continuing forward. And as we've seen in the last decade, their success has just mounted. But given that and the contrast with now, we're seeing a really different picture and it's not looking good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just going back to your previous point, I did see one clip of these two men who are in this union together, and they were talking to some, I don't know, I think it was like an LGBT news outlet or some such that was asking about the casting. And it sounds like the Gaines were specifically looking for a gay couple to cast. Like they had on the casting call, or however they were advertising that they were looking for people for the show, they advertised it with a same-sex couple. And so this isn't even like something that they fell backwards into, or they were worried about getting sued, or like even those would not be defenses for this at all. But this seems like a very, very intentional choice. And this is not an accident. It's really, it goes so much deeper than that. But to your point, Jordan, I mean, a lot of conservative Christians are rightly super upset by this and view it as a betrayal by the Gaineses, who, were like cultural Christians, people that you could point to, and, at least they identified as a part of the faith. But the 2016 dust up with their church is not even the last time that Chip and Joanna have been in the spotlight for this exact same thing. And the most recent one actually was during the whole Target fiasco. I think it was in 2022 when Target went from just being like a casual promoter of rainbows and gay pride to being like actively let's trans the kids and like have children's books that are about like babies being non-binary, or having swimsuits that are specifically for like adolescents who are trying to pretend that they don't have breasts or like tuck their genitals or whatever. And during that time, Chip and Joanna had obviously, I mean, they're essentially business partners with Target. They have this incredibly successful brand, Magnolia, that is sold exclusively at Target. And people came to ask him like, hey, are you going to pull your merchandise from Target? Like everybody else is boycotting Target. Are you going to boycott Target because they're flouting your religious beliefs? To the point that Target had a Satanist that was designing some of this trans merchandise. And that's essentially the Gaines's business partner. And people asked, are you going to do anything about this? And they did nothing, like nothing. And to the point that their business is probably, I haven't looked at the numbers, but more successful now. I mean, they plowed right ahead with partnering with Target. And so it's like Christians are upset about this, but at a certain point, it's like, is this fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me kind of a thing? Like, didn't the Gaineses tell us exactly who they were a couple years ago?
Oh yeah, they did more than nothing. Specifically, Joanna turned off the comments on all of her social media right around that time that boycott started to get traction. And yeah, what we saw was an explosion of this Hearth and Hand home decor line, which I don't know about your Target, but it's front and center in mine. It's definitely the future of Target's home decor. So
Yeah,
to see
second only to
them,
the trans merchandise during Pride Month.
yes, yeah, yeah. You would think like Christians would want to speak up about, Satanism and like that whole part of the role. Like not even the LGBT stuff. Like the first thing, the most offensive thing should be like, the professed enemy of God, but whatever. Yeah, I think that is when we started to see the slippage really publicly. But as we've seen with these cultural Christian influences, there's slippage all the time. And I called it in my article the chosen effect, right? Like we saw the chosen had this rise to fame. So many Christians platformed it, encouraged it, and funded it, and got it front and center. I think you can just find it on Netflix nowadays. But what happened there was Dallas Jenkins, the creator, had some behind the scenes shooting going on, and a producer had a gay flag attached to his camera on the set where the purported cast member for Jesus is walking around, and people obviously questioned that, and the chosen's cast response was either to affirm that flag and what it stands for, or to kind of grovel and say, well, we're supposed to love your neighbor and love everyone, and that's all good and fun when we keep it in context. But the truth is, like I said at the beginning of the segment here, is Christians are called to a certain level of accountability for each other, and we're just not seeing that play out. And I think it's such a tricky balance to strike, because you want those Christian influences in the culture. But at the end of the day, and I think our editor Hayden had a piece go up today on the Federalist about it, if the Christians don't control the culture will never carve out a special space and not bring those other worldly influences in, not force them in. So if you're not standing strong on your faith and not standing strong on those principles, you're gonna fall. And
Mm-hmm.
what we've seen with the Gaines is a fall from grace, far from where we thought they were in even 2016.
Yeah. Speaking of Christian influences on the culture, of course, there was another super sad piece of news this week, and that was the passing of pastor and theologian John MacArthur, who died at 86 years old. I mean, he was truly a modern hero of the faith. There's no denying that, and I just think there's an obvious and huge contrast worth pointing out here between the price that MacArthur paid for his faith and the payment that the Gaines has received for completely abandoning their faith. And I mean, look at John MacArthur's life, but when it costs him something to stand firm on biblical qualifications for pastors or against the divisive racial politics that have been completely tearing apart churches and are an antithesis to the gospel, or defying California state orders to basically disregard the biblical call to not neglect the assembly, and he defied that to faithfully keep his church open, or to reopen it during COVID. Uh, and meanwhile, the Gaineses have caved on what is one of the most basic biblical truths just because it's culturally in vogue and they can make a quick buck. And I just want to get your thoughts on this. Jordan, I saw this tweet regarding that, and I thought it was really, really well put. Half of my feed is about Christian celebrities compromising to the world and the grief it caused to see it. And the other half is about the glory soon to be had for a saint who is finishing his race well. The contrast is clear, and I know which one I want to be like. That was from a man named Troy Frazier on Twitter. But Jordan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, one of the things that made John MacArthur such a standout servant of Christ is his fidelity to the Bible and the biblical principles and theology that drive Christians. And he was always pointing people, even if they were of a denomination that didn't necessarily prioritize that, back to the Word of God. And like you said, marriage is one of the things that's very clearly outlined in the Word of God. It's on that roadmap. It's actually central to the picture that we see of Christ and the bridegroom in the church. And the Gaineses have failed to not only like apparently comprehend that, but share that with the world. And so to see that contrast is striking. And I think John MacArthur, if he were still alive and well, would certainly want everyone to go back to that biblical definition. And it's an important one to adhere to because there's so many trickle down effects from that. And what we've seen with the Gaines' endorsement, not only in this show, but on their social media and in some of their hiring, is that they're willing to endorse lifestyles that not only put that traditional marriage, that perfect gift, at risk, but also the lives of the children that are brought into those situations. And like the cast members on Back to the Frontier using bought eggs and rented wombs to obtain their sons. Those are lifetime, there are lifetime consequences for those children because of those arrangements. And unfortunately, in the United States, there's not a lot of regulation or pushback even in society on that sort of thing. But what we've seen over and over is that children lose in every single situation that they're commissioned that way. And those boys are forever without the mother whose DNA they have, and forever without the mother whose DNA they received in the womb. And that is heartbreaking. That should be a red flag for anyone. And when you go about endorsing lifestyles that require assisted reproductive technology or require those dysfunctional, just at the heart arrangements that go from, tearing a child away from who they were meant to be with, it has these trickle down effects on society that don't just affect the people in those arrangements, but everyone else. And so signing off on that or promoting it is just heartbreaking at the end of the day.
I think it's really easy to see the business incentives here. Like obviously, it helps Chip and Joanna Gaines's business and their income and, the success of their show potentially to appeal to what is culturally in vogue. But there's also a real theological component and a doctrine component. And I think it's it's this idea that's really crept into, I think, every denomination. I don't think any denomination's immune from this. And that's this idea that you can outlove God, or that you can be more loving than God, that you can compromise and then disguise it as compassion, or that if you really want to look like Jesus, you actually have to be more appealing to the culture than Jesus would be. And it's like, he is the standard. He defines what is love. He defines what is justice. He defines what is marriage. He defines what is compassion. And he famously was very like he was friends with sinners, and in fact he called people to follow him who were sinners, including us, including modern day Christians. But he never the call is to repent and believe. It's not to be who you are. And that's something that we're not seeing from the Gaineses. And there's an aspect that I really want to get your thoughts on. It's super disturbing, and it goes to some of the familial dynamics that you just touched on. And that's apparently one of the Gaineses' friends and their employee, I think he's a cameraman, who claims to be a Christian, announced that he was gay and decided to bring his gay lover. So he's married. He decided to bring his gay lover into his home that he shares with his wife and 5 children so that he could pursue an open and like homosexual relationship with this man, even though he's also married to this woman. And the Gaines did not just ignore it, which would have been a problem anyway if this is somebody that would say he's your brother in Christ. But they actively encouraged it and congratulated it. And here is a tweet or an Instagram post rather that Megan Basham tweeted that shows this like support for this friend and cameraman, or friend and employee. He might not be a cameraman, but I think he is. Where Joanna Gaines responds to his post about this issue and says, "You are so good. We love you." There are so many casualties in this. You're talking about 5 children that you are bringing a man into the home. That is one of the most dangerous things you can do for children. They are most at risk when they are living with an unrelated man. I mean, this is putting the desires of adults before the rights of kids in the most blatant way.
Absolutely. And I think I read somewhere that some of those children are adopted. So they went through this redemptive situation where they were placed with loving parents, a man and a woman who are married, which for children is the best outcome that you can have, is living with your married biological parents. The next best outcome is living with married parents, not just
Mhm.
biological, who are a man and a woman. And bringing in third parties, like you said, it is dangerous. So to go from this redemptive situation where they get the next best thing to what could have been, and have their family fall apart in front of their eyes, is absolutely disheartening and heartbreaking. And there's just no way around it. And to sit there and say you are good, the goal is not for Christians to be good ever. It's for us to be Christ-like. And like you were saying, to be Christ-like, to be loving, the most loving thing that you can do is to adhere to God's design. And that is
Yeah.
not God's design in any form or fashion. You're not going to find that anywhere in a way that's beneficial or glorifying to the kingdom of God. And so to see the Gaineses put their business and their image forward in this, and make that the priority, is it's very concerning. And I think Christians do have a right to speak out, which is why when Chip Gaines was lashing out on social media at people who were in good faith trying to engage him on this issue, he lost a lot of points for that, and
Mhm.
rightfully so.
Well, and basically smearing the people who are exactly where Chip Gaines claimed to be a decade ago. I mean, how far they've fallen in 10 years or 9 years or whenever this was, that their church was attacked over this. And the fact that they have slid and they have compromised on their faith that much in that many years. And it makes me think of the verse, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? And I think I can't judge souls, only God can do that. But I think the Gaines are really running the risk of that here. And yeah, it's very sad to see. And I think Christians are right to be upset about it and to speak up about it, because that's what we're supposed to do. So anyway, Jordan, thank you so much. I appreciate all of your insights. Please check out Jordan's work on all of these topics, but specifically her piece on Chip and Joanna Gaines. And I'm sure you'll be seeing her back around here many more times in the future. Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks, Kylie.
All right, let's do a little bit of culture. Everybody else is talking about Superman, so I guess I will talk about Superman. I did go see the movie. I think it was about a week ago, so I'm a little fuzzy on some of the details because obviously I've only seen it once. It's still in theaters, but I have some thoughts. First of all, I went into the movie with fairly low expectations, mostly because there was so much hype leading up to the movie about, oh, it's so pro-immigrant, it's so anti-Trump, it's so this and that, it's so woke. And so here I am going into the movie expecting, well, it's Hollywood, so it probably is going to be all of those things. And I got to tell you, I did not see that. Sure, there are maybe crumbs of that here and there, but I actually thought it was pretty enjoyable. And I am as sick of woke Hollywood dribble as the next guy. But another thing I'm pretty sick of is when conservatives give radical leftists ammo by freaking out over every little thing, and especially preemptively freaking out about every little thing when the movie isn't even out yet. Here's the deal: Hollywood hates you. You know it. I know it. The entire industry rejects all that is good and decent and true and beautiful. They hate Christianity. They reject natural law, which is one of the reasons, of course, why the content Hollywood turns out is so consistently garbage. So if you don't want to give your money to the industry, if you don't want to go see these movies, then don't go see these movies. That's perfectly fine. You can boycott them, take a stand against it, use your dollars to signal that. But the takeaway from culture, just it's woke, it's icky, it's depraved, is such a tired and lazy critique. And especially when you're talking about a movie like Superman, where the vast, vast majority of the film was perfectly non woke and not political, just stop. Just take a deep breath and enjoy it. One of the things about the radical left is that they are miserable people. They exist to be offended. No matter what conservatives do, they hate it. They take umbrage, they take offense. And it's just constant outrage, constant whatever. Cue the video of the woman screaming into the abyss. That is the posture of radical feminism. That is the posture of miserable, woke leftists. That is not the posture that I want to have as a conservative. So that was actually my main issue with the movie, was the way that conservatives preemptively freaked out about it, and in my view, freaked out about nothing. If you want to take issue with the style of the movie or the genre of movie, there's plenty of things that you could critique, but that was just, in my opinion, a pretty dumb critique, especially when there is so much other garbage, woke Hollywood content. Like, this was a really stupid one to take issue with. Now, I am not into sci-fi at all, which is why I'm not a natural fan of much of the superhero genre in general. But there was actually a lot that I liked about this movie. First of all, I just really liked the general aesthetic of the movie. It was bright and bold and optimistic. It really matched the Superman character in a way that I thought was very cohesive and lovely. I also thought the character dynamics were really good and really believable, especially against the backdrop of the recent Marvel movie. I know this was DC, but whatever the most recent Captain America was, it was horrific. I saw it in theaters and it was like I almost walked out partway through because the dialogue was so strained and so canned and so fake. It was actually painful to watch. Whereas in this film, I thought the character dynamics were actually generally across the board pretty good. One place that we saw this was with Clark's parents. They were super endearing and very believable. Just the conversations that they had, the way that they were portrayed, it was like poking fun at the boomerisms of them a little bit, but in a very endearing way. It wasn't like nasty to them. Also, this was dumb, but Crypto the dog, which I know is CGI, it's not even a real dog, but they really nailed the dynamics between the dog and his owner. There's this scene, there also might be spoilers in this, I don't know. There's this scene where Clark wakes up and Crypto, the dog, is lying on his chest, and the dog is just like staring at him, waiting for him to wake up, and just like perfectly still, except his tail is just wagging. And that happens with my dog all the time. And it just, there were many moments like that in the film where it was like, oh yeah, this is really believable. They really captured like the companionship of a person and a dog. And then a very obvious one, but Clark and Lois had really, really believable chemistry. They developed those characters in a way that was believable. The 10-minute interview scene was some of the best dialogue I've seen in a movie of this genre, which can often be just so bad. Their disagreements felt less like James Gunn was trying to lecture audiences through one character who was right and one character who was wrong. That's such a classic Hollywood thing to do, but more through two people who have the same values, but just come at things from different perspectives, which I think is so often how healthy relationships work. One other thing worth pointing out, Mark Hemingway recently wrote a great piece at the Federalist. It was last week. The headline was, "Hollywood's inability to create masculine stars is officially a problem." And he was particularly taking aim at Pedro Pascal and how Hollywood keeps trying to make Pedro Pascal happen as like a masculine dude, and it's super gay because he does not fit that bill at all. And as evidence of this, Mark just talked about the fact that there's really no big male stars right now. Two of the biggest movies that came out recently were the latest Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise and that Formula One movie with Brad Pitt. I mean, these two guys are like 60. Hollywood really has had trouble creating new masculine stars. And he talks about how Timothée Chalamet is like one of the biggest stars right now, but he's not like super masculine. He's not the type of guy that can carry the Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise torch. He's not the kind of guy that follows the old adage of male leads, which is that women want to be with him and men want to be him. Nobody wants to be Timothée Chalamet. Nobody wants to be with Timothée Chalamet. And of course, that also applies to people like Pedro Pascal. He does not embody that. But I think Superman may have finally broken this mold and given us an actual masculine star. David Cornsweet is just like a typical, traditionally, conventionally attractive man. Tall, dark, and handsome. Exactly what Superman is supposed to be. Hollywood didn't try to change that by giving us this little twerp that we were supposed to like think is amazing, and a believable female counterpart who has her own opinions and is very strong-willed, but does not have this like in-your-face feminist message. It's just this like complimentary couple where she steps up to serve him and he steps in to serve her, and they complement each other well, and he doesn't need to step out of the way so she can shine. It was lovely. And I thought that there were actually a lot of things in the film in that regard that were pretty conservative coded. So if you haven't seen Superman yet, it might be worth your time. If you're not into superhero movies, I don't know what to tell you, but don't take the scold's word for it that it's super woke and super anti-Trump and super pro-immigrant or whatever they're saying. Tune it out. Don't be so easily offended, and actually engage with the culture and try to find something that's enjoyable about it, because I think there's plenty that fits that bill in Superman. Anyway, that's all for me. Thanks so much for tuning into the Kylee Cast. I'm Kylee Griswold, and I'll be right back here with a new episode next Thursday. Until then, just remember, the truth hurts, but it won't kill ya.